Sometimes, injustice hides in plain sight. It doesn't come from flashing lights or roaring crowds, sometimes it comes quietly, from the one person who is supposed to protect your potential, your teacher. When 15-year-old Amara Johnson poured her soul into an essay about her late grandfather, she expected respect. Instead, her teacher humiliated her, ripping her words to shreds in front of the entire class. What nobody in that classroom knew was that those torn pages carried a secret powerful enough to shake the school, and reach all the way to the White House. And when the phone rang, Jefferson High would never be the same again. Amara Johnson was the kind of girl people underestimated. Quiet, reserved, never the loudest in the room. But behind that silence was fire. Her grandfather, Colonel Elijah Johnson, had been a decorated war veteran. A man who bled for a country that rarely bled for him. He taught Amara that words were weapons, sharper than swords. So when Jefferson High announced an essay contest for Black History Month, Amara saw it as her chance. She didn't want just to win. She wanted to tell her grandfather's story, his scars, his pride, his belief that dignity was worth more than medals. Night after night, she sat at her desk, writing until her fingers ached. Her essay wasn't just paper and ink, it was a living testimony. She whispered to herself as she typed, "This will make them listen." But she had no idea who those words would reach. Mrs. Whitfield was the kind of teacher students feared, not respected. Cold, rigid, and always carrying that look, the one that said she was better than you. Amara had seen it before, the harsher grading, the suspicious looks, the "you people" comments that slipped between the cracks. But she kept her head down, believing her work would speak louder. The morning essays were due. Amara walked in clutching her paper with both hands. She placed it gently on Mrs. Whitfield's desk, heart hammering. Mrs. Whitfield skimmed the first few lines, her lips curling into disgust. "Oh, not this again. Another pity party." The class froze. Amara swallowed hard. "It's about my grandfather, ma'am. He..." But Mrs. Whitfield cut her off. "You think anyone cares? You people are always dragging history like chains. Enough." And with deliberate slowness, she ripped the essay in half. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She crumpled the pieces, tossed them in the trash, and turned her back. The room was silent. Amara sat frozen, her vision blurring with tears. Some students laughed nervously. Others looked away, too scared to intervene. Amara wanted to scream, but instead, she sat in silence, her throat tight, her heart pounding like a drum. That day, she learned what it felt like to be erased. By lunch, Jefferson High was buzzing. "Did you see what Mrs. Whitfield did? They say Amara cried like a baby. Why would she even write about that stuff anyway?" Phones lit up. Screenshots of whispered group chats circulated. Amara sat alone in the cafeteria, untouched food on her tray. Her best friend, Kayla, slid into the seat beside her. "Don't let her break you, Amara. That essay was powerful. I heard a few kids saying it was the best they'd ever read." But Amara shook her head. "She ripped it up, Kayla. She made it worthless." What Amara didn't know was that her essay wasn't worthless at all. She had saved a copy. And her mother, Dr. Renee Johnson, a civil rights attorney with powerful connections, was about to make sure those words didn't just survive, they would explode. That night, Amara finally broke down and told her mother everything. Dr. Johnson's eyes darkened with anger as she listened. "She did what?" Amara trembled as she pulled out her laptop. "I saved a draft." Her mother read it. Word by word. Line by line. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from sadness, but from pride. "This essay is a weapon," she whispered. "And I know exactly where to aim it." Dr. Johnson wasn't just any lawyer. She had marched in protests, battled in courtrooms, and sat in meetings with people who worked behind the walls of power. With one call, she sent Amara's essay into hands Amara never dreamed would see it. Hands in Washington. Hands in the White House. The next morning, while students dragged themselves into class, Jefferson High's principal, Mr. Daniels, was interrupted by a frantic secretary. "Sir," she whispered, clutching the phone, "you need to take this call immediately." Annoyed, Mr. Daniels picked up. His irritation vanished in an instant. "Mr. Daniels?" The voice on the other end was sharp, professional. "This is the White House Office of Public Engagement. We've read Amara Johnson's essay. It is exceptional. The president himself will see it. And we are deeply concerned about reports of misconduct from her teacher. I trust your district understands the seriousness of this." Mr. Daniels nearly dropped the phone. His palms went clammy. The White House? Calling about a sophomore's essay? His eyes darted toward the window, where students laughed and shouted in the courtyard, unaware that their school had just landed in the center of national attention. By mid-morning, whispers had spread through the school like wildfire. The White House called about Amara. Teachers exchanged nervous glances. Students pulled out their phones, buzzing with disbelief. In the middle of English class, as Mrs. Whitfield barked instructions like nothing had happened, the classroom door swung open. Principal Daniels stepped inside, his face grave. Behind him stood two school board officials. Every student turned to stare. The air was thick with tension. "Mrs. Whitfield," Daniels said, his voice cutting through the silence, "we need to have a word with you. Now." The teacher's face drained of color. She tried to mask it with a smirk, but her hands trembled. She slowly gathered her things as the officials waited. The class held its breath. Amara's heart pounded. Mrs. Whitfield walked toward the door, her heels clicking like a countdown. Just as she reached the hallway, she turned back, her eyes locking on Amara. And in a chilling whisper only Amara could hear, she said, "This isn't over." The door slammed shut. The halls buzzed with speculation. Students huddled in corners, whispering. "They say the White House called about Amara. Do you think Mrs. Whitfield's getting fired? What's in that essay that's so important?" For the first time, eyes that once ignored Amara now followed her everywhere. Some with admiration. Some with envy. And others, with quiet resentment. Amara walked carefully, clutching her backpack, wishing she could disappear. But there was no escaping it now. That evening, Principal Daniels convened an emergency meeting. Parents, board members, and teachers crowded into the library. Voices rose. "This is bad press. Do we suspend the teacher? We need to protect the school's reputation." But as arguments flew, one thing became clear: this wasn't just a school issue anymore. The White House had eyes on Jefferson High. The next morning, a black SUV pulled up in front of the school. Out stepped two officials in dark suits. Their presence sent a shiver down the hallways. They weren't here to arrest anyone, not yet. They were here to investigate. Amara was called into the principal's office. Her palms sweated as she walked in to find the men waiting, notebooks open. "Miss Johnson," one of them said kindly, "we read your essay. It's extraordinary. But we need you to tell us exactly what happened in class that day." Her voice trembled as she recounted every detail: the sneer, the tearing of the paper, the words, "you people." When she finished, silence hung in the air. One official closed his notebook slowly. "Thank you, Amara. That's all for now. But understand this, your words carry more weight than you realize. They've reached the president. And he wants to meet you." Amara's jaw dropped. Meet the president? But as her heart swelled with hope, she caught a shadow outside the office window. Mrs. Whitfield, standing in the hallway, staring directly at her with cold, furious eyes. By the end of the week, rumors spread that Mrs. Whitfield wasn't going down quietly. She's threatening to sue the district. She says Amara lied. She's got dirt on the school. And then, something strange happened. A new narrative began floating through the student body. Whispers that Amara had made it all up. That she had faked the story for attention. That her mother had pulled strings to make it look bigger than it was. Kayla rushed to Amara in the cafeteria. Amara, they're turning this against you. Someone's spreading lies. It didn't take long to figure out who. Mrs. Whitfield had friends on the school board, allies who owed her favors. And she was calling them in. The teacher who had once ripped an essay was now trying to rip apart Amara's reputation. A local reporter showed up at the school gates. Amara Johnson, is it true you exaggerated your story for attention? The questions stung like knives. Amara pushed past them, but the damage was done. That night, she overheard her mother on the phone, voice tight with anger. Yes, I know. She's claiming Amara fabricated the incident. She's threatening to release, what? Amara froze. Release what? Her mother hung up quickly, but the worry in her eyes said everything. Something bigger was hiding under the surface. Something Mrs. Whitfield wasn't afraid to use. The next morning, the school was split. Some students supported Amara. Others mocked her, chanting, "White House Girl," as she walked down the halls. And then came the announcement over the loudspeaker. All students and staff are required to attend an emergency assembly in the gymnasium. Attendance is mandatory. The gym buzzed with tension. Rows of students sat shoulder to shoulder, teachers lined the walls, and board members filled the front row. On the stage stood Principal Daniels, sweat beading on his forehead. Today, he began nervously, we address recent events that have brought national attention to Jefferson High. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. And to provide full transparency, Mrs. Whitfield has requested to speak. Gasps filled the room. Students twisted in their seats. Teachers shifted uncomfortably. And then, from behind the curtain, Mrs. Whitfield walked out. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with defiance. She gripped the microphone, scanning the crowd until her gaze locked on Amara. "You've all heard lies about me," she began. "But what you don't know is the truth about Amara Johnson." The gym went dead silent. Mrs. Whitfield smirked, her voice dripping with venom. "She wants you to believe she's some innocent victim. But I have proof that Amara and her family aren't what they seem." Gasps erupted. Teachers exchanged shocked glances. Amara's stomach dropped. What proof? What could she possibly mean? Mrs. Whitfield reached into her bag, pulling out a thick envelope. She held it high for everyone to see. "In here," she said coldly, "is evidence that will change everything you think you know about Amara Johnson." The crowd erupted in whispers, students straining to see. Amara's chest tightened. Her mother's words from the night before echoed in her head, "She's threatening to release, what?" And as Mrs. Whitfield slowly opened the envelope, all eyes turned to Amara. The envelope trembled in Mrs. Whitfield's hands, but her eyes never wavered from Amara. She slid the papers out slowly, deliberately, like she was savoring every second of suspense. "This," she said, her voice echoing across the gym, "is documentation that Amara Johnson's essay was not original. It was plagiarized." Gasps exploded across the room. Students turned to stare at Amara, whispers hissing like fire. Mrs. Whitfield lifted a sheet for all to see. Paragraphs copied word for word from military archives. Passages stolen from online journals. This is not her work. This is a fraud. Amara's face flushed with heat. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, to deny it, but her voice wouldn't come. Kayla shot to her feet. "That's not true. I saw her writing every night. She worked on it for weeks." But Mrs. Whitfield smirked, waving the papers. say what you like. But the evidence speaks louder than excuses. The gym buzzed with suspicion. Some students glared at Amara. Others looked away in disappointment. Principal Daniels cleared his throat nervously. "Mrs. Whitfield, these are serious allegations. They're facts," she snapped. "And this school owes me an apology for the witch hunt you've dragged me through." Board members shifted uneasily. A few nodded. The White House had called, but if plagiarism were true, the scandal would be even bigger. Amara's eyes burned with tears. She whispered to Kayla, "I didn't copy. I swear." Kayla gripped her hand. "Then prove it." "But how?" When the assembly ended, Amara walked the halls with student stares piercing her like knives. Snickers followed her. "Fake. White House girl, more like cheat house girl." That evening at home, Amara collapsed into her mother's arms. "Mom, what if they believe her?" Dr. Johnson's jaw clenched. "Then we'll fight harder. We have the truth. And if Mrs. Whitfield wants war, she just declared it." 2 days later, an anonymous email leaked to the school board, scans of Amara's supposed plagiarism side by side with her essay. The board called for an emergency review. Meanwhile, Amara's mother worked late into the night, digging into Mrs. Whitfield's past. Files, reports, court documents. There had to be something. And then, buried in an old lawsuit, she found it. Years earlier, Mrs. Whitfield had been accused of suppressing a student's work, a black student who'd written an award-winning essay, only for Whitfield to claim it as her own and submit it under a different name. The case was settled quietly. Forgotten. Until now. Dr. Johnson leaned back in her chair, whispering. "So that's your game, Whitfield. You've done this before." As the review date approached, the school buzzed with tension. Then, on a Friday morning, the principal's phone rang again. It was the White House. "Mr. Daniels, we're aware of the allegations. And we're not dismissing them lightly. But we've conducted our own review. We compared Amara's essay drafts, emails, and time-stamped documents she submitted online. And we found no plagiarism. Her work is authentic." Relief washed over Daniels, but the voice continued. "However, this controversy has now attracted national media attention. Amara Johnson's name is in headlines across the country. And certain parties are digging into her family history." Daniel's blood ran cold. Digging into what? But the line went dead. That afternoon, Mrs. Whitfield returned with yet another bombshell. She stormed into the boardroom during the review hearing, slamming a folder onto the table. "You think she's innocent? You're blind. Do you know who her grandfather really was?" The room stilled. Even Amara froze. Mrs. Whitfield opened the folder. Elijah Johnson wasn't just a decorated veteran. He was court-martialed. Stripped of honors. His medals were reinstated later only because of political pressure. And now his granddaughter is using lies to polish his tarnished legacy. The board gasped. Amara's mother rose to her feet, furious. "That's not true. His record was cleared." But Whitfield cut her off. "You've built this family on a lie. And I will prove it." The room erupted into chaos. Reporters outside shouted questions. Students texted each other furiously. Amara sat frozen, her heart racing. Could this be true? Could her grandfather, the man she idolized, really have a hidden past? Mrs. Whitfield leaned close, whispering just loud enough for Amara to hear. "You wanted history, Amara? Let's see if you can handle the truth about yours." And then she dropped one final sheet of paper on the table. A single name, highlighted in bold. Amara's eyes widened in shock. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The name was connected not only to her grandfather, but directly to someone inside the White House. The room fell silent. The boardroom was dead silent as Mrs. Whitfield revealed the paper with Colonel Elijah Johnson's name, tied to a classified case decades earlier. Students, teachers, and reporters gasped as she declared, "This family has been lying for years. Their so-called hero was disgraced. And now his granddaughter is dragging our school into shame." Amara's face went pale. Her chest tightened. Could it be true? But then, before the board could react, the doors swung open. In walked two men in dark suits. Their presence froze everyone. One flashed a badge. United States Secret Service. "We need to address this immediately." The room erupted in whispers. "Secret Service? Here." The lead agent's voice was firm. "The document Mrs. Whitfield just presented is stolen federal property. And her accusations are false." Gasps filled the air. Mrs. Whitfield's confident smirk crumbled. "What? That's nonsense." But the agent cut her off. "We've been monitoring leaks tied to this case. Mrs. Whitfield, you illegally accessed sealed military records. You are under federal investigation." Amara's mother, Dr. Johnson, rose with fire in her eyes. "You thought you could bury my daughter with stolen lies. Instead, you've buried yourself." The officials laid out the truth. Colonel Elijah Johnson had been court-martialed on false charges of insubordination, later overturned. His name had been cleared decades ago, his honors restored, and he was recognized posthumously for bravery. The evidence Mrs. Whitfield waved around was fabricated from outdated, sealed documents she had no right to access. The crowd gasped again, the entire narrative flipped. Amara whispered, stunned. "She tried to destroy him, to destroy me." The agent nodded. "Not anymore." The board members erupted in outrage. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. Mrs. Whitfield tried to argue, but her words were drowned out by the truth unraveling around her. Then, in a moment no one expected, the agent stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitfield, you are under arrest for unlawful possession of federal records, defamation, and obstruction." Handcuffs clicked. Gasps echoed through the gymnasium. Students who once whispered doubt now cheered as their disgraced teacher was led out in shame. Amara sat frozen, tears spilling silently. After weeks of humiliation, doubt, and lies, the truth had finally spoken. Days later, Amara and her family received an official invitation to Washington, D.C. This time, not just to meet an aide. When they arrived, Amara stood on the steps of the White House. Her essay, the same one once torn and trashed, had been chosen for a national honor. In a televised ceremony, a senior White House official read from her essay, voice steady with emotion. These words remind us that history is not just about the past, it is about the courage we choose today. Then, to thunderous applause, Amara was presented with the Presidential Medal for Outstanding Youth Achievement. Her essay was published nationwide, taught in schools, and broadcast on news outlets as an example of resilience, courage, and truth. As cameras flashed, Amara looked at her mother and whispered, "Grandpa would be proud." Her mother squeezed her hand. "He is." The victory felt complete, but there was one last shock. After the ceremony, the same Secret Service agent who arrested Mrs. Whitfield pulled Amara aside. His voice was low, serious. "There's something you should know. The reason your essay struck such a chord in Washington wasn't just because of your grandfather's story. It's because someone very high up knew him personally." Amara frowned. "Knew him?" The agent nodded. "Your grandfather once saved the life of a young soldier in combat. That soldier is now one of the president's closest advisors." Amara's heart skipped a beat. Her words hadn't just told a story. They had awakened a debt that had lived in silence for decades. Back at Jefferson High, Amara walked through the doors not as the quiet girl ignored in the back row, but as a symbol of truth that could not be silenced. Students whispered again, but this time with awe, not ridicule. Mrs. Whitfield sat behind bars awaiting trial. The school board issued a public apology. And Amara's essay now stood as a lesson to the nation. From humiliation to national honor. From torn pages to a medal around her neck. Amara Johnson's story proved one truth above all. You can try to rip apart words, but you can never destroy the power behind them. Drop your thoughts in the comments, we want to hear from you. Your voice matters. If this story moved you, even just a little, go ahead and tap that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our stories. Because trust me, you'll certainly love it.